Hi, Antonetta.
Hi, Kamara.
It's so nice to see you. Thank you for joining me to do this talk on relationships and the sense of self.
Yeah, I wasn't really organized. We just do this off the cuff, right? Like very spontaneously.
Yeah, I love doing things spontaneously. I think it's real. People like it.
Yeah, it's hopefully there's some people who listen because if they don't know it, then it will be hard to follow. But then maybe they can listen to the recording. Hopefully, there's something that they can use also for their own relationships, right?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I could do is I could share it to my Facebook profile right now and make sure that my friends are seeing it. And then we got people going anyway.
Okay.
Look at that. So here it's showing that we're live, and I'm going to share it to my feed.
And it would be nice if people would just send a little chat that they are there so we can see who's there.
Yeah, and I can share it to our groups as well. More options here. Share to group.
It's also a learning curve, right? Everything you have to learn how to do it. So
Yeah.
yeah, people, please send us, your presence when you see us. Then say, "I'm here." Would be lovely to know your name. And we're going to
Yeah.
talk about relationships, right?
Yeah, we
And the
are.
importance of a sense of self, or what happens if you don't have one.
Yeah, so maybe you could start just by telling people while I share this link, tell the people what a sense of self is and how it develops in childhood.
Oh well, yeah, we have talked about that earlier, but I'd like to, brush up the knowledge and a sense of self that is an abiding sense that you are your own person, that you are in the world for yourself to live your own life, and not be the slave of other people. In that sense, don't be dependent on approval of other people. It's okay, of course, to do a person a favor every now and then, or to kind of be in sync with a person. But if that means on an existential level, it gives you a feeling that you are allowed to be when you get that approval of a person, then that is absolutely a little bit pathological, that I would say, because then you're not in touch with your own self. And what happens if you're not in touch with your own self, then it's really difficult to have a relationship with another person as well.
Would you say that sometimes people go out and look for and start relationships because they feel as though there's something missing that they don't have within themselves?
Well, if I think back of my long life, I mean, I can imagine why I can remember why I started relationship. You just do it because everybody does it, right? It's so supposed to happen. So you don't even that, at least it was for me. I was 24. They didn't have a relationship yet, so I thought, okay, I have to do something about that. And then, yeah, interesting actually. I never realized that so much. So I wasn't really in love with the person. So I started a relationship, and I kept it up for 7 years. And then I was way older, and yeah, then life takes over. You get into your 30s, right? And then my relationship ended because it wasn't really uh, the healthiest relationship in terms of, I remember my boyfriend, he was very much about his mother. I don't know, I could really, in the beginning, you have no idea that what that means. But after 7 years, it became too much. But I also now know why I had those boyfriends, because I was very much about my mother. It's interesting. So I had to learn something from that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so you said, why do you get into a relationship? Well, of course, there's also the physical need, right, to have a lover and thrive when you have, when you're in your, is that what you call in your prime? What is it again? I don't remember that word.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so you want to celebrate your life, your physicality. And yeah, most of all, you want to connect to a person that you think is cool. I think when in your 30s, that's what you still, I thought. Needs to look good. I need to like him very much. And then it's funny how in that age, you still have very much resilience to adapt to each other. Now, unfortunately, after 35 years of marriage, my marriage broke up. And by now, my age is, of course, more advanced. However, I don't give up because I don't like to live alone. And I don't think people are meant to live alone because even growing as a person, for example, you need somebody around. You need the confrontation. So you may be better off by yourself and don't have that many quarrels, or sleep better for that matter. But yeah, then nothing happens really. And
Yeah.
so I decided to, and so now I have a loving partner here. And no, we're going just on with life and love.
My therapist that I've been seeing for the last 7 years tells me that relationship is like a mirror in which you see your deepest shit. And sometimes it can be really great. There can be really beautiful parts of it, but also relationship will bring up whatever you haven't worked on within yourself that you still need to see and bring awareness to and bring the light to, so that you can advance yourself on a emotional, spiritual level.
Yeah, and that confirms really what I just said. If you're by yourself, you don't have that mirror, or maybe especially now in the COVID situation, like you don't meet that many people. Otherwise, you could also, have friends or even casual encounters with people that can hold up that mirror. But if you are just about to be by yourself online, I don't think it works so well. Even though that said, I think even this conversation brings about something. So I appreciate that.
Well, we have some people watching right now. Thank you guys for being here. And if you have any questions about relationship and the sense of self, feel free to type it in the comments and we will respond to you.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. That would be lovely. So I have here, when I started Healthy Sense of Self, I started out with finding out what it would be good for. And I came up with with 12 categories. And relationships challenges, that was number 2, actually. I don't remember what number 1 was. What was number 1? It's child rearing. Yes, child rearing. Bringing children up without a sense of self, that is a problem. But, having coming back to the relationship, I can read you a few lines from what I wrote here, and maybe people relate to it. Shall I do that?
Yeah, I would love that. And then we can discuss it and see how it relates to our experiences.
Yeah, and if people have questions, please put them in the chat box.
Okay.
So, healthy sense of self and relationship challenges. The kids prefer to be out of the house because the atmosphere at home is suffocating. Why would that be?
Maybe
I feel I easily lose control over my behavior. Why would that be? I try to be understanding and give him the space he seems to need, but when will he feel the need to spend time with me? What's going on? My wife has this high-profile job, and I know it's pretty demanding, but we always seem to talk about her job and how good and smart she is. When I want to talk about my day, she seems so spaced out. It's like she isn't even with me. Where would she be? Are any of these ponderings familiar to you? Would you be able to write a similar statement about the relationship you have with your partner? After the first few years of being deeply in love, staying in a committed relationship often requires a lot of work. Knowing yourself is a big advantage for doing the work that is required. And that's where healthy sense of self comes in, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think, like for me, sometimes when I look at things from a really small perspective, like if, uh, for instance, if I'm in an argument with somebody and what they've said has hurt my feelings or triggered me, then it can take me into like negative thinking. And then I can kind of shift blame onto them and be like, it's his fault. He did this. That hurt my feelings. That was awful of him to do. and not look at it from a bigger picture perspective about like why am I having those thoughts? Like, why am I reacting in that way? So for instance, one of the lines that you just read just now was, why I'm trying to give my husband the space he needs, but when is he going to want to spend time with me? And that thought really carries the emotion of kind of like feeling lonely and sad and unwanted. And I think that people with a lack of sense of self often feel that way. I know that I myself have felt that way before.
Yeah, right. And when you're first married, or like even when you're dating and everything, then the excitement covers up everything, every question, and we just have like one goal to make it work, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then if you live longer together, then then how do they say that? This monkey comes out of the sleeve. Is that how you say that? Something like that. But anyway, and so we all have like sort of a specific mindset that we have created when we were younger, and depending on the situation where we were brought up with, we have created, let's call it survival strategies, to be able to cope with the things that are not so smooth in life. And those survival strategies protect us really strongly because that's what they mean to do, right? But oftentimes these survival strategies don't take other people into account, or they have certain expectations that are actually um, wrong, plainly wrong, because you think if I do this, then the other person does that. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen. The other person does something very different and then comes back to you, and you think like, I don't know what to do to keep it straight, for example. Yeah. And so to be able to know your own survival strategies, I think that is a very, very good thing to study. And that is not like an overnight affair. You have to really, think about things, map out how your inner self is, like how you have created that, like passively. You didn't do that consciously, but now you have to go back and become aware, actively aware of what you're trying to do. I can give an example. In my case, for example, I was very scared of conflict. I needed to keep things straight at all cost. So I avoided to be angry. I avoided other people to be angry. So that brought me into trouble, because how can you manipulate other people just for your own sake? That you think, if he behaves this and that way, I don't have to be angry, so I feel good about myself. And then I lived up to my own strategy, but it has a far-fetching effect. Do I make myself clear here?
Mm-hmm.
So what is your strategy, if I may ask? What's your survival strategy?
My survival strategy. Well, I mean, there's been lots of different survival strategies. But I think that the main one, sorry, I have to stop that from happening. The main thing was that my parents divorced when I was little. When I was 3 years old, my father left my mom, and my mom was really devastated. And so I really kind of lost both my parents. And I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel loved. I didn't feel supported. I didn't feel connected to. And that played out through my childhood to where when I became an adolescent, I was really seeking love and attention in the opposite sex, like in men, and trying to prove that I was good enough to earn people's love and respect and attention. So I would try really hard at things. Almost everything I do, I try really hard at. And part of it is my character is that I'm just really curious and kind of intense and passionate when I get behind something. And part of it is like the need to feel approval from other people, because that's my survival strategy, to feel good about myself because I wasn't getting that love from my parents.
Right.
So being like the teacher's pet, oh, I would try really hard in school to get good grades, so that I would feel as though I was doing something right, so that I'd have
Yeah.
some kind of sense of value. So that was one of my survival strategies.
Yeah, and you see, then we get into the topic of motivation, and that's also a healthy sense of self concept. Um, why do you do what you do? And it makes so much difference also in uh, the ultimate effect with what you do. If you're motivated, you do well at school because you want to be going to university, you want to be a doctor. I am just saying something, and then you are healthily motivated. But if you do it to get approval, that's a typical example of indirect motivation, unhealthy motivation. And next to getting to know your survival strategy, how are you made up inside? Like, what's your reaction based on? It's also good to know whether you do things for healthy or unhealthy motivation. That gives you a lot of insight on your own behavior. So if you talk to your partner, your husband, your wife, or even to a friend, or even to a person who works for you, and you do that from indirect motivation, there's a whole other world beneath the surface that you can't see it, but it's funny how the other person sort of notices because it really acts out in body language. So um, even though a person doesn't know what's going on, they feel something funny, and their reaction is based on that feeling. So, but if you do things for the right motivation and you really move to do something for the person, for example, then it comes across in a very different way and you get a different reaction. And then, you can see how the results also are um, relatable to that situation.
Well, it looks like we have a comment from Alexander Supertramp who says, alcoholic mother, no father, pregnant at 15 and again at 16. I was looked down upon. For the next 40 years, I did whatever I could to be accepted.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a common story. It's a lot more common than people know. That I would say that the vast majority of our culture struggles with a lack of sense of self, of really feeling good and whole and complete within themselves so that they can act from that authentic place of feeling secure and go forth in the world and pursue their dreams and feel good about themselves.
Well, I want to just thank a person. I can see the chats here, so but thank you for sharing because that is definitely very relevant. And also for you, it's now a question to ask yourself: what do I do to get a healthy sense of myself, so you can free yourself from all these behaviors that you have put in place to feel at least a little bit good about yourself. Like, Kamara, you worked for a healthy sense of self. You read the books and stuff. And I think that helped you to look at yourself in a different way. Um, Unfortunately, it's not an easy task. It's not happening overnight. But I want to say to this person, what's the name of the person?
Alexander.
Alexander. Know that you're not alone. It's just I wrote this book too because it has not been labeled like that. It's not a common good, and what that people know. Hey, I have a lack of sense of self, and that's why I do this and that. Oh, I have a healthy sense of self. Now I'm free. I can live my life. And how to get from the lack of sense of self to a healthy sense of self. I think that should be like open to everybody. You don't have to go to the psychologist. You can do it and work on this yourself. That is, if you are recognizing the situation. So I hope that kind of helps you to get on a path where you can do something for yourself to change that.
Thank you for sharing that. There are some other words that are relevant to this field or to this topic, like attachment trauma is one thing that they talk about, like different attachment styles and how people, if they don't have attachment with their caregivers and parents in childhood, that they have this issue. Or also if they're neglected or abused or abandoned, that it can just cause a really deep core wound that, unless it's fully looked at and you shine some light down in there, that it can play out in all of your relationships and in people pleasing and in building a life that's not really the one you want, and
Yeah.
feeling like you have to do stuff for others to get their approval or to prove yourself that you don't really want to be doing.
Yeah, or what you just mentioned, like about sex, for example. How many people use sex to, to be at least accepted, or and how devastating is that really is, because then it's not an expression of love anymore, but it's like an expression of fear, right? And also, I want to mention this, like I used to think, like when I started this journey, I thought like my parents were not good, especially my mom. She didn't see me, and she was all about herself. She was a narcissist, and she didn't know it, so I had to discover that. But now, after say how many years, 30 years, I say like, wow, being a parent is really difficult. And because not because you're a parent, your own issues with your parents have stopped. Not because you're a parent, you suddenly know who you are and you have no dependencies anymore. But then, and when you get that baby, it's really neat in the beginning, you can show it to everybody. But then the moment the kid grows up and they get a voice of themselves, they kind of block all the time your own processes. And then you're not supposed to be angry, but you still have that need to get your own things done. So I respect that very much by now. It's almost like there's no good solution, because the healthy sense of self, it's a little bit of an ideology, so to speak. And I don't even know if you can really implement it. But if you can use bits and pieces of it, it makes the world a better place. I just want you to know that being a parent deserves respect, because especially in this day and age, like let's mention that too, like you have to homeschool your kids, or you suddenly get everybody home, and what about your life? And what about your issues, right? Oh, and then there's still other things going on. The Black Lives Matter movement, very important. But what about my own life, right? How can I just use some energy for my own and make some space and have some me time? So all these things are very complicated. So please don't think that I just offer an easy solution, but it's just a way to contribute to make the world a better place, your world, and also of the people around you. Because if you get in touch with yourself, you get to know your survival strategies, and then you can make a choice and say, hey, this time maybe I'm doing something different. But if you react on autopilot and you're not aware of what you're doing, you just know, yeah, I do that all the time. That's who I am, yeah? Or you do some things for indirect motivation, then if you become aware of it, then you can at some point make a decision. Maybe I'll do something different this time. And you can see how that would kind of contribute. It doesn't solve everything, but it would make it better.
It helps when people have the ability to see a bigger picture perspective and to look back in the past through their relationships, through periods of time when they did things one way or when they did things another way. But our viewer, Alexander, has left a comment. He says, "Thank you so much. It made me cry to say it out loud. I've learned cognitive behavioral therapy recently, and I'm learning to recognize my false beliefs."
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, and it's a lot of work too. So hang in there. You have to just, be persistent. And then there comes a moment that sometimes you just want to give up, because it seems sometimes that your body has a mind of its own. And then even your mind and your emotions, they are willing to do the right thing, but then your body kind of still is triggered by certain things from the past. Then please no, don't give up, because it's all a matter of recreating another habit, right? And so that it's good to know that you will be sometimes, I call that be hijacked by your own body. Like, I did my best. How come my body doesn't do what I want or what I think? Because there's an old pattern, and everything in nature is slow, right? And our bodies are also slow to adapt new things. And sometimes you do need help. I find EMDR, that's kind of eye movement desensitization reprocessing. I find that a very useful tool to kind of numb down the triggers in your body. Like you process it, and then it seems that things become less acute. So if anything, I could recommend that if you really need that.
Well, thanks for sharing that. That's wonderful. Sorry, I'm just distracted. Hold on a moment.
Yeah, it's okay. Well, there's a lot we can say about relationships and a sense of self. Like, there are those, we talked about the I call that early childhood survival strategies, and they develop what I call ego references. That's a word nobody has ever invented, but I call it ego references. There are kind of rules you set for yourself that for example, one rule could be, I can never be angry. I should not be angry. That is an ego reference because I didn't like conflict. My ego reference, I should avoid to be angry. Huh? And that is a sort of a holy grail for yourself. And then it's funny how what you just said, a mirror, like you have a partner and he triggers your anger all the time, right? And unless you recognize it, that it's a mirror, which I start to do only now, I tell you the truth, it takes a while. But ego references, because they are so crucial in your existence, because your sense of self depends on it. Like, I have to explain something. A sense of self is a healthy thing, but if you depend on approval, I call that a substitute for this sense of self. And we want to perform these ego references to the best of our ability, because that makes us feel good about ourselves. And that is a sort of a substitute for sensing yourself. But because you don't have a sense of self, gaining this substitute sense of self becomes a matter of life and death. Now, can you imagine you have like two partners? One has ego references, the other one has ego references, and it's a matter of life and death to each one of them. So what happens? Nobody lets go. Now, the moment you become aware that, oh, this is an ego reference, maybe I can just let that go because it's fictional anyway. And, so now now there's only one person who kind of, but what do you say, that bumps into the other person. And that's already better. What if you do both? Like, maybe, hey, we love each other. What are we actually talking about? That's just old stuff. Let's not put that on each other. Let's
right.
Work
and
out
I think it
own
requires one or both of the people have to be able to recognize the pattern and see what's going on so that they can interrupt that pattern and be like, hey, you've done this before. We've been here before. This is old stuff. This is not actually a current thing. And one of the techniques that you teach about, coming into the body and being mindful about the present and feeling your body, noticing your environment. These are common trauma reduction techniques to help people get back into the present and the here and now. And it's also kind of the basis of most spiritual traditions around the world is, be present, be here now, and find that center within yourself that is that eternal place of peace. And I think when we operate from that perspective or level, it's easier to see the patterns that play out in our lives and stop them and talk to somebody about it. Be like, hey, I was reflecting on what I said earlier and how I behaved. And I see that came from, a very much younger version of myself.
Yeah,
when I was a child, I really wanted that love.
That requires a lot of awareness. I just have this visual right now that I would like to say to people who are watching and following this discussion. Take a big board and map out certain behaviors that you do, and then when you do it again, just put number them, like, oh, one more, and then you regroup all these behaviors, and then you get a sort of a map of your inner self. I think that could be fun to do too, because I also compare the brain with the bare branches of a tree, because you can't look into your head, right? But that would be a sort of a reflection of what's going on in your head, all these neurological kind of things that go on. And yeah, I think that's it's just good to visualize, like, hey, I'm good at this, but here is something that doesn't always work. What could it be? Why? And then tie it back to your childhood, because if you know why you do what you do, and you see that it's actually useless because you know so many years older, then you can stop it and do something else, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have to get going now, but I've really enjoyed having this conversation with you.
I enjoyed it too. I hope that people liked it. Let us see, a reaction, because that's very inspiring also. Thank you.
Well, we've had quite a few viewers and we've got some reactions and some comments. I call it a success. I'm really glad that we did this. Let's do it again soon.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Kamara. Thank you all.
Okay, bye.
Have a healthy sense of self.
Yeah.